China is poised to revolutionize the nuclear energy landscape. The Asian giant wants to build the world's first thorium-based molten salt nuclear power station, a development that could reshape global energy production.
For decades, fusion has lived in the same place, always imminent, always incomplete. A technology that promised a clean energy revolution, yet could never hold itself together long enough to matter. Then, at the end of 2024, inside a guarded research complex in Hefei, China, ran an experiment that didn't end in a flash. It didn't collapse in seconds. It held. A plasma hotter than the sun can find, shaped, stabilized for more than 17 minutes. And if that number is real, it doesn't mean fusion power has arrived. But it does mean something else. The world's most difficult energy problem may be shifting from physics to who controls the engineering. The machine is called EAST, the Experimental Advanced Superconducting Tokamak. Online, it's been branded as China's artificial sun, a nickname that sounds like marketing until you remember what a tokamak is built to do. Take hydrogen fuel, heat it until matter becomes a storm of charged particles, plasma, and hold that plasma away from every surface that could instantly kill the reaction. According to statements from the Chinese Academy of Sciences and state media reports, on December 30th, 2024, EAST sustained plasma at roughly 124 million degrees Celsius for approximately 100,006 seconds, about 17.5 minutes. To people outside the field, that may sound like trivia. To people inside it, duration is everything, because fusion doesn't fail politely. Fusion fails suddenly. Plasma is not fire. It's not gas. It's not smoke. It's matter pushed so hard that electrons rip free, leaving a violent cloud of charged particles that responds to magnetic fields like a living thing. At fusion temperatures, that living thing wants to do three things constantly: twist, ripple, and escape. And if it touches the reactor wall, even briefly, the physics turns brutal, the plasma cools, the reaction collapses, heat spikes into the wall, and the experiment can end in a disruption. Fast, loud, and costly. This is why older milestones were measured in seconds, and why even a few minutes changed careers. According to publicly available records, the previous benchmark was approximately 403 seconds in 2023, achieved under comparable high-temperature conditions. So the claim isn't just that China improved a record. It's that China demonstrated a kind of operational, control-sustained, repeatable stability that fusion has historically struggled to maintain. Not a miracle, an engineering posture. And that posture has consequences. To keep plasma off the walls, tokamaks rely on magnetic confinement fields, strong enough to act like invisible architecture. EAST uses superconducting magnets, designed to carry immense currents with minimal electrical loss. Here's the paradox at the heart of the machine. The magnets must operate at cryogenic temperatures, close to absolute zero. The plasma they confine is measured in hundreds of millions of degrees. Cold hardware holding hot chaos millimeters of tolerance, separating success from shutdown. Then there are the surfaces built to survive what leaks out. High heat regions of tokamaks often use tungsten, a metal chosen for its ability to tolerate punishing thermal loads. But materials alone don't create stability. The plasma has to be heated, shaped, and fed energy continuously. Neutral beam injection drives high-energy particles into the plasma. Radio frequency heating pushes energy in through tuned waves, and control systems adjust confinement as the plasma tries to break symmetry. Modern tokamaks increasingly rely on advanced real-time computation, sometimes described as AI, to interpret thousands of signals and respond faster than human operators can. Because in fusion, the window between stable and gone can be measured in moments. If the reported duration and temperature are accurate, EAST did something important. It demonstrated that long-duration, high-temperature plasma operation is achievable, not as a lucky spike, but as a sustained state. Song-Yun Tao, a lead scientist at the Institute of Plasma Physics in Hefei, has described the goal as proving that ichthyological confinement can work at reactor-relevant timescales. In interviews, he and his team have emphasized that the run was not a single lucky shot, but part of a broader campaign of iterative improvements. But it's critical to say what this doesn't mean. It doesn't automatically mean net electricity to the grid, a commercial power plant, or unlimited energy solving everything next year. Fusion has multiple gates. Duration is one gate. Other gates remain. Net energy gain across the whole system, component lifetime under neutron bombardment, continuous fueling and exhaust, and the most difficult of all, turning a high-energy experiment into a machine that runs like infrastructure. EST is an experimental platform designed to explore those boundaries. But the real question isn't what EST is, it's what EST is training China to build next. While EST collects data and breaks operating records, China has discussed the next step: CFETR, the China Fusion Engineering Test Reactor. In the fusion ecosystem, CFETR is often framed as a bridge not just studying plasma behavior, but validating the engineering needed for power plant-like operation. One of the biggest obstacles is fuel. Many fusion concepts rely on tritium, a radioactive isotope of hydrogen that is scarce in nature and expensive to source. So modern reactor designs explore tritium breeding, typically using lithium blankets. Fusion neutrons strike lithium, the reactions produce tritium, and the reactor, at least in principle, can replenish its own fuel. This is not a minor detail. A fusion plant that can't supply fuel at scale is not a power revolution, it's a laboratory. So when CFETR is described as targeting longer operation, higher power, and tritium fuel cycle testing, it signals a shift from, can we create fusion conditions, to, can we run fusion like an energy system? And that is where the story stops being only scientific and starts becoming strategic. The United States has its own milestones. In 2022, the National Ignition Facility announced a widely publicized result in inertial confinement fusion using lasers to compress a tiny fuel pellet to fusion conditions. It was a genuine scientific achievement, but it also highlighted a central divide in fusion approaches. Laser fusion aims for extreme conditions in an instant, brief, intense bursts. Tokamaks aim for controlled confinement over time, stability, endurance, and repeatability. Both are valid scientific roads, but they answer different questions. A burst can prove fusion can ignite. A sustained plasma can prove fusion can be held, managed, operated. And in the language of energy infrastructure, operated is the word that matters. Fusion isn't only a physics competition, it's also a manufacturing competition. It demands high performance, superconductors, precision machined vacuum vessels, high power electronics, specialized materials that tolerate heat and neutron damage, and a workforce trained to assemble and troubleshoot systems that behave unlike any conventional plant on Earth. China appears to be moving faster, benefiting from centralized coordination and large-scale industrial capacity. The U.S. approach is more distributed, often driven by a mix of national labs and private startups operating on different funding timelines and competing priorities. Neither model is inherently superior, but they optimize for different outcomes. Centralized programs can sustain long-term infrastructure investment without quarterly pressures. Distributed ecosystems can explore unconventional designs and attract private capital. The question is which approach closes the gap between experiment and deployment, and there's a critical caveat. Speed in fusion is not just about pouring concrete faster. It's about learning faster, running experiments, analyzing failures, upgrading designs, and repeating the cycle. If EAST's long-duration run is part of a pattern rather than a one-off headline, then the compounding advantage becomes clear. Every extra minute of stable plasma is data. Every extended run tests components under real conditions. Every successful control cycle becomes a template for the next machine. And in a field where most progress has historically been measured in tiny increments, compounding minutes can reshape decades. Fusion isn't frightening because it's explosive. Fusion is unsettling because it's foundational. Energy abundance changes everything upstream. Industrial production, computation and data centers, desalination and water security, materials processing, even long-duration space missions, where power determines propulsion, communications, and autonomy far from the sun. People often talk about fusion as clean energy. That's true in a narrow emissions sense. But the deeper truth is simpler. Energy sets the ceiling of what a civilization can build. And the first country to turn fusion from a heroic experiment into reliable infrastructure doesn't just gain electricity, it gains options. Here's the unresolved question at the center of this story. Was EAST's run a spectacular endpoint, or a routine waypoint in a program that's accelerating? Fusion history is crowded with records that didn't translate into power plants, not because scientists were wrong, but because engineering at this scale punishes optimism. Yet the pattern emerging from Hefei is hard to ignore. Long-duration operation demonstrated. Next-step engineering machines in active development. Fuel cycle problems addressed through tritium breeding concepts. And a national strategy that treats energy R&D as long-game infrastructure rather than election cycle funding. If that strategy continues to convert experiments into systems, the implications won't arrive as a dramatic announcement. They'll arrive quietly in patents, in supply chains, in workforce depth, in grid integration plans, and eventually, if the hardest barriers fall, in power. Fusion has always been almost there. What's changed is this. The distance to there may no longer be measured in breakthroughs. It may be measured in who builds fastest and who builds to last.